Checking in with Chapter 9, the penultimate chapter of The Inconvenient Indian by Thomas King. As long as the grass is green, one of these phrases that was said to Native peoples when treaties were signed weren't actually included in the written text of those agreements. And so I mean, King actually starts off this chapter kind of leading off from what he said in the last chapter of what do Native people want? And he said how many Native people are there? But saying at the beginning of this chapter, it's not a helpful question. It's better to probably ask what individual nations want. But really, whose needs have been driving all this? And I think the answer to that is it's white needs for land, white needs for the wants, desired needs for the resources, whether it's salmon or other stuff. And he kind of, in this chapter, he takes us through a variety of cases where Native peoples, had direct, how well the legal system worked for Native people in all this. And he traces you through a bunch of these cases, which span, that there was protests, there was demands, stuff like that were all ignored by white governments. And then finally legal cases, which stretch 60, 70, 80 years, to varying degrees of success. Some more successful than others, with all the kind of the double standards. There's the whole thing about the Musqueam, which I've heard a lot about, this being a thing on the lower mainland, where their land was leased to whites, to golf course, to various property owners for well under property values, and locked in for a huge amount of time. And when it finally came up, the Musqueams were like, well, we'd like to put this to market value, free enterprise, capitalism. But this was seen as a terrible thing to do. That why would you do that? And all these poor whites who have no say in the matter, they're not a member of the council. They can't vote. It's no taxation without representation. And you can feel bad for the individuals who are on the land, who've been paying less than, much less than, market value to rent these lands for years and years, and the other people before them. But that kind of double standard, the Oka thing, stretching back to the French government giving it to some religious fathers, and then it getting passed on, them selling it on to various things. And you get the Oka crisis, where they finally just sort of screw it. The nearby town was about to just do huge property development on this land, which for hundreds of years has been this is our land, and nobody's been listening to us about it. The mayor and that calling in the provincial police, and there being violent confrontations and people dying on both sides, about it. It's, King ends this chapter with I don't think that, that the legal process is particularly going to be the savior, the thing that's going to ride to the rescue of, this situation. We can all live happily ever after, both whites and natives. It's it's another political tool that is used by white, the dominant culture's government to make sure that they get what they want. This is more all about what they want. There was King's talks of talking to an official saying at the end of the day with the whole Oka crisis thing, it's like, well, when it comes down to it, they should have just taken the money for the land and walked away. It's that they're the reason why all this has come to a head, which is like, yeah, I guess that's one way of putting it. Or another way of putting it would be that the white need for land, the overbalanced, is always going to win over native rights, native desires for their land, for sovereignty. So yeah. Last chapter, I believe, is where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Because yeah, the picture that King paints isn't a happy one, and unfortunately, I don't think this is what should Native people do. It's there seems to be a lot of goodwill on the white side, but there seems to be also a huge part of it which is like the people who are actually in control, like, no, we want the land, we want all the taxes, we want all the power, and we're not going to give any of that up. And why would we? Regardless of how liberal of a government comes in, very little ever seems to change in the way of how my government relates to Native peoples. There's lovely words said, but nothing seems to actually change. And as a part of that white majority, I wonder how do we change? How do we change? How do we actually have a better relationship with Native peoples? How do we respect them? How do we work out something where we're not their fucking keepers? Because they don't fucking want us as keepers, and we should not want to be their keepers. Okay. Well, I'm gonna listen to the last chapter because I'm still woefully uneducated, and this has been a tough book for me to listen to. I've been kind of belly aching my way through it. And that hasn't got anything to do with King. It's got to do with that just should rightfully be an uncomfortable subject matter for me to hear about. And overwhelming. It's overwhelming because I don't live this day to day. I'm a white dude who sails through the world. So, it behooves me to actually sort of give myself at least a little bit, a minimum amount of time to actually kind of incorporate this into my world as well. In however infinitesimal a way I am doing it. It is infinitesimal in comparison to somebody who is a Native person in this country, in this continent. We'll say this continent because, from the pattern of all the stuff, the Americans will do something and then the Canadians will do it. Whether that is fucked up, like it has been for the most part, or if the Americans actually come up with a better solution, that's probably where we'll be looking for it, because we're fucking Canada. We're fucking Canada. The junior member and the assholes, the stingy assholes of the stingy, moralistic, pretensions of being morally upright Canadians. Yeah. All right, more videos later.